All right, welcome everybody. This is our first client preview webinar of the new Mobilityways platform. My name is Basil Chowdhury. I'm Liftshare Group's commercial director, and I'll just be kicking us off in a moment. We're just waiting for a few more attendees to trickle in. We still see the numbers creeping up there, so obviously people are still logging in and getting settled. We're really excited to have so many of our clients here joining us today. The aim of this webinar is to show you some of the great stuff that we've been working on over the last few months. The majority of it won't be me, it'll be my colleagues. And if we have a little look at our agenda, we'll see what we are hoping to cover here today. So I'll just take a moment to tell you a little bit about Liftshare Group's renewed mission, what Mobilityways is and how it fits into that picture. Then I'll be handing over to my colleague, Stace Annison, who many of you will know. She's one of our account management team, and she's going to give you an introduction to ACEL. She'll explain what it is and how it works. And then we'll be handing over to our head of product and innovation, Sarah Roberts, who will be giving you a demonstration of the new Mobilityways platform. At the end, there'll be opportunity for questions and answers. And so by all means, think about any questions, put them in the Q&A tab in Zoom, and we will be talking through those at the end of the session. We expect this to last under around 45 minutes. We'll be presenting for about 25 minutes before we hand over for Q&A. So let's get started then. Our renewed mission. Well, as you know, Liftshare has been around a little while. We've been here for 2 decades, 22 years, and we started because our founder, Ali Clabban, really wanted to impact some of those 36 million empty car seats traveling on our roads every day. And together with clients like you, we've been able to get over 1 billion miles of journeys off our roads. And that's because of our members and our clients working together to make lift sharing happen. But as you'll know, one of the biggest challenges has always been behavioral change, convincing colleagues to do something a bit different and share a ride to work. Well, during the national lockdown, the first one in March this year, like many of us, we had an epiphany here at Liftshare because overnight, 50% of the UK workers were working from home. That's an Office from National Statistics fact. And that's probably represents about 30 years of behavioral change happening overnight. Because of that, we realized that what seemed like it was the impossible the day before was possible. Behavioral change really can happen. And we decided to embark on a renewed mission for the Liftshare Group. That mission is to make zero carbon commuting a reality. Whether it's people working from home, active travel, public transport, or lift sharing, we want to help organizations like yours make zero carbon commuting a reality. So why is it important to focus on the commute? Well, shockingly, the commute is responsible for 5% of all UK emissions. 5% of all UK emissions, that's 18 billion kilograms of CO2e emissions every year. So if we don't impact the commute, if we don't make the commute net zero, then we won't, as a country or as organizations, be able to hit our own net zero goals. So that's the idea behind our new sister brand, Mobilityways. Liftshare is not going anywhere, but this new brand, the aim is to empower organizations to track the data, understand and deliver zero carbon commuting. We're going to get started now by turning to my colleague, Stace Annison. Stace is one of our account management team, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about ACEL.
Lovely. Thanks ever so much, Basil. And just before we get going, I suppose, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of things that Basil mentioned in the introduction. In the last 30 years, the energy sector has reduced by 60%. Now, the transport sector has only reduced their emissions by 2%, and that's in the last 30 years. Really quite a worrying statistic. And in some regions, we've even seen that increase. Transport is now the largest emitting sector, which isn't a surprise. But when we're looking at the single largest contributor, What may come as a surprise to you is the commute is the single largest contributor to those emissions. So with very ambitious and much needed net zero targets looming, the question really is, can we achieve net zero without tackling the commute? Next slide, please, Harry. Cool. After networking with a large number of our clients that have super ambitious net zero targets, we have soon learnt of the real sense of urgency to take action. However, we quickly realised that many were not equipped to setting themselves up to succeed by reducing their transport emissions. In fact, the majority hadn't taken into account the commuting emissions. Now, considering this is the single largest contributor to the transport emissions, we had to ask the question why. And the frequent answer was, in fact, down to the difficulty and the time it would take to calculate and benchmark these emissions. And on top of that, it was the inability to then set science-based targets to work towards ensuring the right amount of progress was being made at the right time. With the difficulty in calculating commuter emissions, the resource it would take, and the inability to track and measure progress, Mobilityways has created the ultimate solution, and this is the solution you can see on your screen. ACEL. ACEL is a unique tool to calculate the average commuter emissions level for organisations and communities. Consider ACEL as the brain behind the strategy to making zero carbon commuting a reality. It will quickly generate a standardised calculation of commuter emissions for your organisation. And the way in which it is built allows organisations to get their ACEL on an annual basis at a click of a button, which means it makes that all-important task of benchmarking and monitoring a walk in the park. It will also act as your roadmap to zero, helping you stay on track and hit those key milestones. So let's put that into an example you may be working on right now. You may be developing a travel plan, and within that, you need to address key objectives, strategies, and timeframes as to how you're going to reduce commuting emissions year on year. Now, the ACEL will provide you with the data to document all of those things I've just mentioned with confidence and certainty of success. So let's dig a little deeper and take you to our ACEL map. Harry, if you don't mind, just pop into the next one, please. Here at Mobilityways, we have calculated the average commuter emissions level for each region. As you can see, the UK isn't looking too green. Not only is it a fantastic visualization, but it gives us an insight as to how each region is performing, including a breakdown of transport within that area. As you can see with this particular example, 56% of the population is driving alone, with small percentages of the population actively travelling and using public transport. Data like this doesn't give us all of the answers, but it certainly helps us ask the right questions. I've recently delivered an ACEL for a client with 2,000 employees using their latest travel survey data. The ACEL has provided them with their annual total commuting emissions. And the average commuter for this client emits 599 kilos of CO2e per year. So it's not too dissimilar to the national average. The ACEL also has given an ACEL-T. Now, the ACEL-T is an ACEL target, and at whatever point you're looking to do a net zero by 2040, it will give you a milestone of 2030, and it will give you an element of what you need to do in order to reach your net zero target. The client can now see a clear breakdown of how each mode is performing. And on the flip side to that, the ability to identify short, medium, and long-term objectives with regards to reductions, improvements, and significant increases that need to be made. For those of you that are on the webinar that work in facilities, the ACEL will also help to understand operationally the resources required on the ground. Okay, so we now have calculated our emissions, but how do we know where the opportunity is to get to zero? When working closely with Mobilityways, we'll delve deeper into your ACEL, mapping the roads to zero in greater detail. And to do this, we use our invaluable Scoping Smart Mobility report, to understand our opportunity to reach zero carbon commuting. So what does this mean for the Net Zero project? Well, the scoping report will deliver a comprehensive analysis on all of the viable commuting options for your staff, which means when looking at significantly reducing single occupancy vehicles, a high emitter, you are able to understand the alternative, more sustainable options available, which in turn helps set achievable targets for modal shift. The luxury of having this report is knowing the art of the possible. From a strategic point of view, for example, travel planning, but also to be able to forecast the sustainability savings. So the amount of CO2e your organisation would save if everyone were to travel sustainably. So let's go back to the powerful data that's within this report that can provide you for a strategic point of view. Now, this is a report we delivered for the Leeds NHS Trust, and you'll see that the potential for sustainable travel is incredible, with 99% of employees having at least one sustainable travel mode. And if that didn't give you the confidence of making zero carbon commuting a reality, 93% have at least 4 sustainable travel modes available to them. The report breaks down each viable mode of transport in great detail, and it also gives an interactive map. Now, this is a map that's showing the public transport analysis. Due to the analysis comparing the journey time against the time it would take to drive, it starts to paint a really interesting picture as to the behaviours and perceptions your staff may have around public transport. The green dots show public transport options that take twice the amount of time as a direct car journey. The question here is, why would an employee take public transport if it is quicker to drive? This is your data, and you now have the power to influence change. And with our support, we would suggest sharing this invaluable data to the operator that primarily services your area to highlight the need to improve accessibility. Moving on to the second map, where it analyses the employees that have a lift sharing option within a mile of their location. But it will also show the number of options available. For those that are in green are postcodes that have more than 9 options available to them, amber between 3 and 9, and red have less than 3 options. So why is this useful? Well, it gives you, the organisation, the confidence in implementing a lift share scheme as one of the solutions. It will also help build the strategy around that scheme. This map also shows the credibility of locating shared mobility assets, for example, car clubs, and I've pointed out a couple on the map there for you. But it also allows potential introduction of van pooling or demand responsive transport, such as Zelo. And last but not least, the active travel map. All of this is based on existing infrastructure, not as the crow flies. With this insight, you will be able to understand the sheer volume of employees that could actively travel, whether that's walking or cycling, enabling you to create a strategy that promotes this form of commuting. From your ACEL, you know only 15% are actively travelling. And from the scoping report, you now know that 58% can actively commute. So we use the travel survey intel to also understand the motivation and behaviours towards this mode. Now, it may be that 5 miles or 30 minutes is just too much for somebody. And if that's the case, we can now use the scoping report to work with micro-mobility partners that offer e-bikes or e-scooters to introduce a new solution to increase active travel. Which leads me nicely on to introducing Sarah. Sarah is now going to give you a tour of Mobilityways and how we can gather further travel insights and support the delivery of behaviour change.
Thanks, Stace. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So the Mobilityways platform is there to help you visualise how your employees commute now and what the potential for change is, and to track and incentivise modal shift towards sustainable commuting. The platform has the ability to run scoping reports, which plot all of your employees on a map and calculate your average commuter emissions level, as Stacey showed you. You can survey all of your staff to find out how they're travelling, what barriers they have to travelling more sustainably, and draw trends from the data that you receive back. You can send personal travel plans to all of your staff that plot the employee's personal commute and show them all of their available travel options. You can also create Liftshare accounts for all of your staff, or just for those that have stated they would be interested in having an account to see their matches amongst their direct colleagues. Next slide, please. So starting with the survey functionality, the system has the ability for you to create and send surveys to all of your staff at once, or break down surveys into groups of your choice, so survey by department or by location, etc. We'll have a library of survey templates for you, including our standard Mobilityways travel survey that you can use to benchmark your results against others in your sector and in your region. Next slide, please. When using the standard Mobilityways survey, we can use the data collected to generate an ACEL. Once this data starts to get collected on the dashboard through surveying, this automatically loads into this ACEL simulator, where you can then see what your regional ACEL average is and where you compare against it. You can also see the modes of travel that are emitting the highest levels of CO2. They are there, they're just a bit small and blurry, enabling you to set targets and implement changes to reduce these highest modes. So as you can see highlighted in the bottom here, 33% of those who responded to this survey drive alone to work. If you compare this with your scoping data, you'll be able to see that something like 95% of your workforce will have a sustainable travel option available to them, and therefore know that this driving alone mode can be decreased with the implementation of behaviour change initiatives. On the right here, if you can pop that up, Harry, thank you. You can then compare a historic ACEL to last year's ACEL and see how you're improving against a specific mode that is a high emitter year on year. So at the bottom here, against the high emitting driving alone mode dotted in red, we can see that the 2018 ACEL saw 53% of staff driving alone, but the 2020 ACEL saw 21% driving alone, showing a positive decrease in those driving alone to work over that time period. Next slide, please. The dashboard will also house the ability to send your employees personal travel plans, also known as PTPs. PTPs plot an employee's personal commute and give them public transport, walking and cycling results, as well as being the only PTP provider to show car sharing matches all in one place. And if you've got any bespoke services that are specific to your staff at your site, like a shuttle bus, we can add those onto your PTPs as an option to show as well. When you click into one of the options on the PTP, clear directions are shown for each mode. For example, if you selected to show more information about the public transport option you have, the PTP will tell you exactly which bus to get from which bus stop and how far you need to walk to get to that bus stop. Active travel results will tell you how many calories the journey will burn, and with all sustainable travel options, it will tell you how many trees you save if you switch to this journey and use as your commute. Next slide, please. All PTPs are followed up with technology that collects whether the employees have made a change to their behaviour or not, which is then shown on the Mobilityways dashboard. It shows how many of your employees that had a PTP have a car share option available to them, how many have changed their travel behaviour, and if so, from what mode to what mode, and breaks down the habitual change into those who have tried a new sustainable mode, but they've gone back to their original mode, like driving on their own, and those that have made a change for the long term. Next slide, please. As well as sending PTPs out, which show all of the commute options to each of your employees, we will also be able to soon target specific groups of employees based on their commute options. So by using the scoping report, we can see who lives within 6 miles of your headquarters and then communicate directly with those employees about cycling options, instead of emailing those that live 30 or more miles away who are less likely to need information about cycling initiatives. You can also use this functionality to communicate new options as well. So if there's a new park and ride service or a new shuttle bus service, you can filter those that live within an area that would benefit from this new service and target them directly to promote and or offer discounts for that service. Next slide, please. Anyone with access to the Mobilityways dashboard will soon have access to all of the behaviour change articles that we've worked on with partners. This will include things like tips to get more of your staff walking and cycling, case studies of successful implementations of e-bike schemes in the UK, and marketing materials from the best resources to promote your behaviour change initiatives. Next slide, please. All of these modules can work individually or all together. So you can just use this tool to survey your staff and generate an average commuter emissions level, or you can do that and then delve in deeper into the data and connect those survey responses with actual employees on your scoping map. As Mobilityways is part of Liftshare, we've included this functionality as part of the process as well, just on the left there. We can automatically create pending Liftshare accounts for all of your staff, and then it's up to them if they want to activate it. Or we could do it for just those who have expressed interest in car sharing. If you ask on the survey, would you like a Liftshare account, and upload these to your own private Liftshare scheme. Whichever modules are chosen, we can help you analyse and review the success of them and make sure you hit your behaviour change targets and get the most out of the feedback from your employee surveys through deep dive workshops. If you'd like to see more around a specific feature like how the survey builder works or a breakdown of just how automatic all of these features are for you, then I'll be happy to provide more information on those. Just reach out to your account managers after this webinar. For now, it's back to Basil, I think, for the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So already I can see quite a few questions coming in, but if you do have questions, please just add them to the Q&A panel, the Q&A button on Zoom, and we will get round to them. So keep adding your questions and let's get started then. So Harry, do you have the first question there for me?
Yes, I do. So we've got a question here. Can I use historical travel data to calculate my ACEL?
Okay, Sarah, I think that's one for you.
Yes, yeah, as soon as a travel survey is done, we can create an ACEL for you almost immediately. So if you use our tool to survey, as soon as you close that survey, an ACEL can be generated. And if you've already done a travel survey, then just send us that data and we can create an ACEL for you straight away.
Okay, next one, Harry.
So let's have a look. Okay, so can I ask other questions in a travel survey?
I think another one for you, Sarah.
Yes. So we've got some templates for you, some long surveys, some shorter surveys, and some medium ones, but you can edit or add any questions you like in those. So it's completely up to you what questions you ask.
Okay, so I'm just going to look through some of the questions here we've got coming in on the Q&A panel. Keep adding them if you if anything comes to you. So one here from Richard Hughes. How is ACEL calculated? So ACEL is calculated using government assumptions. So the government publishes, I think it's DEFRA actually, or it might be BEIS, but the government publishes every year a series of factors that are used for emissions reporting. These are averages about the average amount of emissions output per vehicle. And then we combine that with data from the National Travel Survey, which includes average distances. And so in our analysis, this provides a number that's within a 2% margin of error from doing it individually, working out everybody's individual distance and travel and car and emissions. It gives us a number that's very close, but without a load of that pain and aggravation. And so ACEL, we've designed it so that we use government factors and averages, but it's designed to be lightweight, easily calculated, and therefore not requiring huge amounts of information from your staff, which would be hard to gather. Next question here is about shift workers. So I think this might be one for you, Sarah. Whilst you can see how many options are available per area, which is very useful, how can this be adapted for shift workers?
Sure, yes. So with the scoping report, when we run a scoping report, we ask for the time that those employees start work. So if you had a shift that started at 2 p.m, we can run a scoping report for them. And if you had another shift that started at 6 p.m, we can run a scoping report for them. And then it would pull in the public transport options that are available around that time.
Okay, and then I've got a question here. I think Stace, you'd be the best person to answer this. Do you recommend incentives for employees to complete the to complete the surveys?
Lovely, thanks, Basil. Great question. Yes, we would absolutely suggest incentivising your travel surveys. Ultimately, we need to understand as much of the bigger picture. So as more the respondents we can have, the better. And we do know, we do our own surveys in terms of our public members, that when we do attach an incentive there, the response rates obviously shoots up quite high. So yes, we would suggest that along with the other kind of work that we would do with you. But yes, in terms of looking at the travel survey, incentivizing that initially would be the best way to go.
Great. I've got a question here from Catherine. What is the minimum response rate required for the ACEL? So the survey is open for as long as you would like it to be, and you can, send multiple requests to your team to fill out the survey. What we classify as a certified, verified level is when it's within 5% margin of error. That's a statistical standard, and that depends on the size of your employee base. And so the number it changes. There's a mathematical formula to determine what a 5% margin of error is. But to give you an example, if you had 5,000 employees, it would be circa 400 responses would be within a 5% margin of error. But it depends on your employee numbers. And if you talk to your account manager, they can calculate what your margin of error would be. Okay, and then next question. Does a score of 0 ACEL represent zero commuting emissions? Is this a realistic target? Perhaps that's one for you again, Stace.
Yeah, thanks, Basil. So in terms of the analysis that Mobilityways will do, it will ultimately tell you your opportunity. Now, your opportunity may not be 0, but it will be as close as you possibly can get to 0. Ultimately, the main aim and the objective for Mobilityways is to help reduce your carbon commuting emissions to as little as you possibly can. There'll be some cases where we will be able to help clients get to 0, but again, this will be able to be visualized within the scoping and the travel survey data, as well as the ACEL. So when we combine all of that data, we'll be able to understand the full opportunity. But we understand that the full opportunity in some cases may not be 0, but it will be as close as we possibly can get it.
So the aim is to get to 0 carbon commuting, and each organization has a different target. I know many of you have got 2040, 2050 targets. Some trailblazers amongst you have 2030 targets. And so we want to help plot out the course to get there. And that will mean ACEL reductions each year. And in the early years, there's quicker wins, and our scoping report shows what those will be. And obviously, the closer you get to net zero, the harder it will be. But with electric vehicles and renewable power, there are options, but it's not about getting to net zero overnight. It's about a course to get there in line with your organization's net zero targets. So I've got a question here from Nick Hill. Is data sharing permissible with Liftshare as a third party? Yes, absolutely. So for this service, we are a data processor, not a data controller. So you remain the data owner. We just process it on your behalf in much the same way as your payroll provider might process employee data. So it's completely GDPR compliant, and we won't take ownership or control of the data. That remains with you, and we're just processing it. Another question for you, Sarah, I think from Catherine. Does the scoping pick up multimodal journeys such as drive and park and ride and cycle?
So the scoping map doesn't do that as a specific function or button, but because, as Stacey showed you, because it plots all of your employees all on one big map, and you can see the operators that are there, you can see who lives farther away, we can talk to you about multimodal options that are available. What we're doing at the moment is looking into how we can show multimodal options on personal travel plans, and after, because that will show the users exactly what options they have available, and then we'll move on to the scoping report and hopefully be able to show that to you as a business as well.
Fantastic. We've got many questions here. Do keep them coming in, but I'm not sure we're going to have time to go through them all. What I'm trying to do is group those that have come up from multiple attendees into single questions, because we've got a lot of questions coming in here, but do keep them coming in. Okay, so I think this next one is one for me from Polywise. Does the annual cost of Mobilityways include existing Liftshare license fees, or is it in addition to these? Mobilityways is a separate platform and it requires separate license, but please do just talk to your account manager. They will work it out. There's discounts available to existing customers, of course. And so, but by all means, talk to your existing account manager. They can help put more meat on the bones for you. Obviously, this is just an overview and you'll want to know a little bit more, and they can put together a proposal for your organization. Okay, let's see. How do you incentivize employees to complete surveys to ensure you have a good response rate each time you survey? Sarah, would you like to answer that?
Yes, yeah. So the surveys we've been running are very different from client to client. We had one business who was offering a £200 smart speaker, and it was just one prize that one person could run. I've found the really good ones are where you offer a first prize, second prize, third prize, because people feel like there's more opportunity for them to win. But best thing to do is talk to your account manager. They can go through the potential incentives that we recommend, ones we've used in the past that have worked and not worked. So, yes.
So we've got a question here from Catherine, which is similar to questions others have asked, which is how, year on year, it's going to be slightly different responders, different subset into the surveys. The answer is it just has to be a statistically relevant sample size. And so you across your organization, this is just creating an average. And so the ACEL it's a benchmarking tool. And so as long as you have a statistically relevant sample size, which is as I said earlier, within a 5% margin of error, and we'll help you calculate what that sample size should be for your organization, then the data is comparable. It doesn't need to capture 100%. It's a sample. I've got a question here, and there's a few which are on a similar sort of topic to this, which is related to the pandemic and whether now is the time to do this with people perhaps anxious about public transport. Well, the process for the Mobilityways platform is a cycle, and it starts off with data, which is ACEL and scoping, and then it moves into behavioral change with personal travel plans. A lot of people are telling us that they would like a benchmark now to understand what the standard position is for their staff, what people normally do to get to work, what the benchmark is now, before they then look at what they do to return to work, return to the office, what they do in terms of office relocations or moving forwards. And so the two can be separated. So you don't necessarily have to instantly start sending out personal travel plans or incentivizing staff to change behavior. You could right now just gather data. What's possible? What's the options for your staff? How are your staff currently getting to work? How were your staff getting to work before the pandemic? So a lot of clients are very interested in the data gathering element right now, and then with a view that when they are returning to work right, building back better, getting people to go back to the office after a year, but choosing a more sustainable option. So those two things do work together. Okay.
Can I just add something onto that
Of
as
course
well?
you can.
Stuart, I think it's a really fantastic question. And when we're working with clients at this moment in time around how do we overcome the pandemic and looking at returning back to work, it's more around the real focus is also looking at the employee engagement. So it's so important at this moment in time we understand the feeling and the perception of our employees before they even return, to understand, I guess, preempt how they're going to be traveling anyway, where their concerns are. And once you know what that is, that gives you, that puts you in a better position to be able to plan to accommodate that and to potentially mitigate any of those concerns that they have. So I think really fantastic question. Mobilityways has a lot of kind of dimensions to it in the terms of what we can do. And right now, what it is, Basil's very well put it in terms of the perfect time is to plan now, and we can give you all of that data, but we can then help you when the time is right to provide that consistent messaging to your employees and to give them their options.
Thanks, Stace. So we've got a variety of questions that are similar to this one. Does the ACEL survey take into account the varying distances that individuals travel each day? So the ACEL is designed to provide a benchmark that can be used to compare individual organizations year on year, but also against other organizations, against regions. We use the National Travel Survey averages, and the National Travel Survey is conducted by the Department for Transport, and they calculate average distances for each mode of transport, and we use that in calculating ACEL. And so it helps us to benchmark without having to request lots of information from your staff. And so the idea is that you can see compared to previous years, but also compared to your other businesses, other regions, how are you doing? And it's we use the National Travel Survey and we update the ACEL calculation as the National Travel Survey data changes. And so the data will always use the latest government data set. Okay, well, we are, I think, coming up to the end of our scheduled time. There's still questions here flooding in. So let's talk about next steps, because we want to get those questions answered for you. You all will have an account manager because you're all existing clients, and we know that you'll want to see more, you'll want to see a little bit more detail and get all these remaining questions answered. But more importantly, you'll want to know how this fits in the context of your organization with your own net zero targets and your own response to getting back into the office after the pandemic. So your account manager will be reaching out to you. Please make the most of that, and they would be glad to book an appointment to show you more and follow up with you, answer any questions we haven't managed to get round to today. It's been a great pleasure to have so many of you with us, and we're really excited over the next week or two when those meetings start happening to hear your feedback and understand what you think of it all. Thank you so much, and thank you to my colleagues, Harry, for running the background work here, our head of product, Sarah Roberts, and Stacey Anderson, one of our account managers. Thank you, everybody.